At dawn in 1940, as British troops ran for their lives toward Dunkirk, one man stayed behind. No rifle, no machine gun, just a medieval longbow. In the age of tanks and bombers, Jack Churchill loosed an arrow and rewrote the rules of modern war. The German patrol moved through the morning mist like ghosts, 5 men, rifles low, boots crunching softly on the wet French soil. They believed the fight was already over. France was collapsing. The British were fleeing. Victory felt inevitable. They were wrong. Behind a crumbling stone wall near the village of Le Captain Jack Churchill waited, 33 years old, 11 men from his company dead in the last 3 days. Around him, the British Expeditionary Force was disintegrating rifles, abandoned vehicles, burned officers, destroying documents in ditches as they ran for the sea. But Churchill wasn't running. Resting in his hands was a 6-foot English longbow, a weapon older than gunpowder, older than the nation now fighting for its life. He had carried it through years of competition, through endless practice. He knew its weight, its pull, its silence. The German sergeant stepped closer, 30 yards, close enough to smell sweat and oil. The man scanned hedges and windows, trained to fear rifles and machine guns. He never imagined death could arrive without a sound. Churchill drew the string back to his ear. The bow creaked softly under the strain. For a heartbeat, history held its breath. Then the arrow flew. The sergeant collapsed before his men understood what had happened. No shot, no warning, just a body hitting the ground. It was the first confirmed longbow kill in a European war in centuries. And it happened not because Jack Churchill was insane, but because he understood something modern war had forgotten. Fear kills faster than bullets. And this was only the beginning. The arrow still trembled in the German sergeant's chest when the rest of the patrol froze in terror. For a second, no one moved. No one shouted. Their training had prepared them for gunfire, for grenades, for ambushes made of steel and smoke. It had not prepared them for this. By the time the Germans scattered, Jack Churchill was already gone, melting back into the chaos of retreating armies and burning roads. Behind him, France continued to collapse. Ahead of him waited Dunkirk. The British Army had no idea what to do with a man like Churchill. He had done everything the right way once. Sandhurst, Burma, infantry doctrine drilled into his bones. But peace had bored him. Routine had suffocated him. So he left the army, chased adventure across Africa and Asia, edited newspapers, rode motorcycles into jungles, crashed into water buffalo, and taught himself to play the bagpipes because no one told him not to. When war returned in 1939, Churchill came back, but not as the man the army expected. He returned carrying history itself. A longbow, a Scottish broadsword, bagpipes slung over his shoulder like a challenge. Other officers laughed. Some whispered that he was unstable. Commanders worried he was a liability. Regulations had no paragraph for medieval weapons in a war of tanks and aircraft. Churchill didn't argue. He didn't explain. He simply fought. He knew rifles were faster. He knew machine guns killed more efficiently. But he also knew something older, something deeper. In close combat, fear decided everything. A bullet killed the body. Terror shattered the mind. And nothing terrified a man faster than realizing the rules had just changed. As the last British ships pulled away from Dunkirk, most soldiers left behind their weapons and their pride. Jack Churchill came home carrying his bow, his sword, and his music. He was just getting started. Britain did not celebrate Dunkirk. It survived it. 300,000 men escaped the beaches, but they came home stripped of weapons, vehicles, and illusion. Across the channel stood a victorious enemy. An invasion felt inevitable. The question was no longer if Germany would strike, but when. Prime Minister Winston Churchill demanded something new. Not armies, not defenses. A weapon of defiance. Small units, hand-picked volunteers, men willing to strike the enemy in his own territory and accept that most would not come back. Thus the Commandos were born. The training was merciless. Mountains, ice-cold water, live ammunition fired inches overhead, forced marches until feet bled and lungs burned. Anyone who hesitated was sent away in shame. Jack Churchill thrived. He was older than most of the volunteers, but stronger, harder, sharper. While others struggled, he pushed forward with grim joy, as if the war had finally become honest again. And he brought something no one else did: silence. He taught men how fear worked, how surprise shattered discipline, how violence delivered without warning broke resistance faster than gunfire. Knives, bare hands, and sometimes impossibly an arrow fired from the dark. At night, when exhausted men collapsed into their blankets, Churchill practiced with his sword, steel whispering through the air, muscle memory from another age waiting for its moment. Some still thought he was insane, but slowly they began to understand. War wasn't just about killing. It was about breaking the enemy before he could fight back. And Jack Churchill was becoming a weapon designed to do exactly that. Soon they would unleash him, and Europe would remember the sound of bagpipes on the battlefield once more. The first real test came not in a classroom or on a windswept Scottish hill, but on a frozen shore under enemy guns. December 1941, Nazi-occupied Norway. The mission was suicide by design, a dawn assault against fortified positions, coastal artillery, machine guns, German troops who owned the high ground. Speed was everything. Hesitation meant death. As landing craft cut through the black Arctic water, the Commandos crouched low, weapons clutched tight, breath steaming in the cold. Explosions from naval guns lit the fjord like lightning. Somewhere ahead, Germans were already scrambling to their positions. And in the bow of the lead craft stood Jack Churchill, upright, exposed, calm. No helmet pulled low, no rifle raised, just bagpipes under his arm and a broadsword hanging at his side. When the ramp slammed down onto the rocks, Churchill did something no German defender could possibly understand. Before a single shot was fired, before a single man charged forward, he began to play. The sound of the bagpipes cut through gunfire and explosions like a scream from another century. Ancient, defiant, impossible. German soldiers froze. They had trained for bullets, for grenades, for shouting men running at them in the smoke. They had not trained for this. When the music stopped, Churchill stepped forward, hurled a grenade, drew his sword, and charged up the beach. The Commandos followed. What should have taken hours was over in minutes. Guns silenced, bunkers cleared, defenders shattered. Fear had done its work before the killing even began. By the time the smoke cleared, the Germans were dead captured or fleeing inland, and a legend had been born. Jack Churchill had proven it in blood and steel. The old ways still worked. The raid was over, but the shockwaves were just beginning. News of the assault raced up the Norwegian coast and straight into German headquarters. Reports didn't make sense. British commandos had landed in force, destroyed batteries, vanished into the sea, and one officer had led the charge playing bagpipes with a sword in his hand. Some German officers dismissed it as exaggeration. Others were furious. All of them were shaken. Within weeks, Hitler ordered thousands of additional troops diverted to coastal defense. Men who should have been fighting in Russia or North Africa were now standing guard on cold shores watching the sea for ghosts. One raid had forced an entire army to look over its shoulder. Back in Britain, Jack Churchill became something the army rarely knew how to handle, a success that broke the rules. Commanders who once questioned his sanity now requested him by name. The War Office stopped asking about his weapons and started asking when he could deploy again. Men listened when he spoke. They followed when he moved, because they had seen the effect. They had watched trained enemy soldiers hesitate, freeze, collapse, not because they were outgunned, but because their world no longer made sense. Churchill understood that moment, that heartbeat where doubt crept in, where fear replaced training. He built his leadership around it. Soon he was promoted, given more men, harder missions. And the war kept expanding. From frozen Norwegian beaches, his path would lead south into the furnace of the Mediterranean, into cities where every street was a trap, every building a potential grave. There would be no music next time, no clean landings, only blood smoke and close combat. And in that chaos, Jack Churchill would do something no one thought possible. He would walk into enemy positions with a sword and make grown men surrender. The legend was no longer forming. It was accelerating. The raid was over, but the shockwaves were just beginning. News of the assault raced up the Norwegian coast and straight into German headquarters. Reports didn't make sense. British commandos had landed in force, destroyed batteries, vanished into the sea, and one officer had led the charge playing bagpipes with a sword in his hand. Some German officers dismissed it as exaggeration. Others were furious. All of them were shaken. Within weeks, Hitler ordered thousands of additional troops diverted to coastal defense. Men who should have been fighting in Russia or North Africa were now standing guard on cold shores watching the sea for ghosts. One raid had forced an entire army to look over its shoulder. Back in Britain, Jack Churchill became something the army rarely knew how to handle, a success that broke the rules. Commanders who once questioned his sanity now requested him by name. The War Office stopped asking about his weapons and started asking when he could deploy again. Men listened when he spoke. They followed when he moved, because they had seen the effect. They had watched trained enemy soldiers hesitate, freeze, collapse, not because they were outgunned, but because their world no longer made sense. Churchill understood that moment, that heartbeat where doubt crept in, where fear replaced training. He built his leadership around it. Soon he was promoted, given more men, harder missions. And the war kept expanding. From frozen Norwegian beaches, his path would lead south into the furnace of the Mediterranean, into cities where every street was a trap, every building a potential grave. There would be no music next time, no clean landings, only blood smoke and close combat. And in that chaos, Jack Churchill would do something no one thought possible. He would walk into enemy positions with a sword and make grown men surrender. The legend was no longer forming. It was accelerating. After the prisoners were marched away, the battlefield went quiet. No gunfire, no shouting, just the smell of dust cordite and fear slowly lifting from the hills of Italy. Jack Churchill stood alone for a moment, sword lowered, watching German soldiers disappear down the path they had just surrendered on. 42 men, captured without a fight. The men around him stared with something close to awe. To them, he was unstoppable, untouchable, a force of nature that bent reality to his will. But Churchill wasn't smiling. Later that night, away from the men, he sat on a stone wall and cleaned his sword in silence. Blood flaked off the steel. Not his blood, someone else's. Always someone else's. For the first time in the war, a thought crept in that he couldn't charge away. How long does luck last? He had faced bullets, shells, mountains, and men, and somehow walked away every time. But war had a way of collecting debts, and Churchill knew it. Every soldier did, whether they admitted it or not. That night, one of his officers asked him quietly if he thought the stories about him were getting out of control, if the Germans might start hunting him specifically. Churchill didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. They already are. The legend had grown too loud, too visible, too dangerous, and legends don't get to choose how their stories end. As dawn broke over the Italian hills, Jack Churchill strapped on his sword once more. He would keep going, because stopping wasn't in his nature. But somewhere deep inside, he understood something no one else did yet. The war was about to collect its price, and next time, fear would not be on his side. By 1944, the war had hardened. Italy had become a grinding stalemate, mud mountains and blood traded for every yard of ground. So when orders came transferring Churchill east to Yugoslavia, no one was surprised. The front lines there were savage. Partisan warfare, no mercy, no rules. If the war still had teeth, Yugoslavia was where it bit deepest. Churchill arrived to support resistance fighters striking German supply lines along the Adriatic coast. The terrain was brutal, steep hills, narrow paths, nowhere to hide. German garrisons dug in high above the beaches, waiting for attackers to bleed uphill. In May, the order came: seize the island. The landing went wrong immediately. Delays, confusion. The partisans hesitated. Surprise vanished into daylight. German machine guns were ready. Still, Churchill advanced. Up the slope he went, bagpipes screaming into the windsword, at his side, refusing to acknowledge what every man around him already knew, that this assault was collapsing. Mortar fire walked closer. Explosions tore through the rocks. Men fell. Screams echoed across the hillside. Then the mortars found him. A single salvo landed among his command group. In seconds, the ground was littered with bodies. Every man around Churchill was dead or dying, except him. Alone on the hillside, ammunition gone. Escape impossible, Jack Churchill did something only he would do. He sat down, picked up his bagpipes, and began to play. A lament, a farewell, a final act of defiance. German soldiers approached slowly, weapons raised, unsure if what they were seeing was real. A grenade exploded nearby. Darkness took him. When Churchill awoke, the war had finally caught him. He was a prisoner. The sword was gone. The pipes were silent. But the legend was far from over. When Jack Churchill opened his eyes, the battlefield was gone. No gunfire, no wind, no mountains, just iron bars, concrete walls, and the heavy silence of captivity. The Germans had finally caught the man they'd been whispering about, the officer with the sword, the bagpipes, the madness. They flew him north under guard, convinced that anyone named Churchill had to matter. Berlin interrogators expected secrets, connections, leverage. What they got was disappointment. He wasn't related to the Prime Minister. He held no strategic intelligence. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a warrior. They sent him to Sachsenhausen. For most men, the camp was an ending: hunger, forced labor, waiting for execution or collapse. But Jack Churchill treated it like another problem to solve, another enemy position to study. He memorized guard rotations, counted footsteps, watched shadows crawl across fences. Within weeks, escape became inevitable, not hopeful, inevitable. One night, he crawled into darkness with 4 others through a tunnel carved with spoons and bare hands. For a brief moment, he was free, walking through Nazi Germany with nothing but nerve and stubbornness, heading for the Baltic and neutral Sweden. 2 weeks later, they were caught, returned to captivity, sent deeper into the Alps, far from any front, far from rescue. Most men would have broken. Churchill waited. By spring 1945, Germany was collapsing. Guards were nervous. Orders contradicted each other. When the SS prepared to move prisoners south, no one knew if it meant execution or bargaining. Something extraordinary happened. The German army stepped in. SS guards withdrew. The prisoners were abandoned in an Italian village, free, stranded, alive. Most waited. Jack Churchill didn't. He walked 150 kilometers through the Alps, injured, hungry, alone. 8 days later, he stumbled into American lines, ragged, unarmed, impossible to ignore. The madman with the sword had escaped death again, and the war still wasn't finished. Jack Churchill returned to Britain in the spring of 1945 as Europe exhaled for the first time in 6 years. Germany had fallen. The camps were being opened. Crowds filled the streets celebrating survival more than victory. For millions of men, the war was finally over. For Churchill, it felt abruptly unfinished. He had escaped bullets, mountains, interrogation rooms, and concentration camps, only to come home when the fighting stopped. Yet one enemy still stood. Japan continued to resist, and British soldiers were still dying in Burma and across the Pacific. To Churchill, that meant the war was not done with him. Almost immediately, he volunteered again. He packed his gear, studied Japanese defenses, and imagined one last landing, another hostile shore. Another charge forward with steel and sound sword raised and bagpipes cutting through chaos. He boarded a ship heading east, convinced his story still had a final chapter to write. History ended it without asking his permission. On August 6, 1945, an atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Nagasaki vanished in fire. The war did not fade out. It stopped. Absolute. Immediate. Japan surrendered. There would be no invasion, no beaches, no last stand. When the news reached Churchill, he did not celebrate. He did not cheer with the others. He complained. Later, men would repeat his words in disbelief that without the atomic bombs, the war might have gone on for 10 more years. It sounded dark, even monstrous, but it revealed something honest. Jack Churchill did not belong to peace. He was forged in chaos, most alive under pressure, defined by movement and purpose rather than silence. Now, the world was quiet. The British Army no longer knew what to do with him, and for the first time in years, neither did he. Peace did not tame Jack Churchill. It displaced him. With the war over, the British Army tried to fit him back into a world of forms, schedules and restraint, staff roles, training commands, administrative duty. None of it worked. The man who had walked out of the Alps and into American lines was not built for desks or quiet routines, so the army sent him where chaos still lingered. In 1947, Churchill was posted to Palestine, a land tearing itself apart as the British prepared to leave. Bombings, ambushes, fear hanging in the air like smoke. Once again, he found himself between forces that hated each other, trying to keep violence from consuming everyone. When a Jewish medical convoy was massacred near Jerusalem, hundreds of doctors and patients were trapped, surrounded, and helpless. Churchill stepped in. He negotiated. He walked through hostile streets, unarmed, calm, smiling. Somehow, it worked. 700 lives were evacuated under his protection. It was the same lesson applied one last time. Fear could be disarmed. After Palestine, his military career slowly faded. He trained paratroopers, jumped from aircraft in his 40s just to feel something again. When he finally retired, the world expected him to slow down. He never did. He surfed river waves no one else dared ride, built model warships, played bagpipes at ceremonies, tossed his briefcase from a moving train into his own backyard just to avoid a walk home. To strangers, it looked like madness. To Jack Churchill, it was freedom. He had survived a world that tried repeatedly to kill him. Now he refused to live quietly inside it. The war was over, but the man who fought it on his own terms never really was. Time eventually did what war could not. Years passed. Empires collapsed. The world Jack Churchill had fought for faded into history. Missiles replaced rifles. Screens replaced maps. War became distant, clinical, impersonal. The age of men charging with steel and courage seemed impossibly far away. Churchill watched it all with quiet amusement. He never chased fame, never polished his legend. When asked about the war, he told the truth, plain, unembellished, almost casual. A man captured 42 Germans with a sword. A man escaped a concentration camp and walked out of the mountains. The facts were unbelievable enough. On March 8, 1996, Jack Churchill died peacefully at the age of 89. No battlefield, no music, just silence. He had outlived almost everyone who had followed him into combat, almost everyone who had shared his captivity, almost everyone who understood the world he came from. Obituaries struggled to explain him. One line came closest. If he had not existed, it would have been impossible to invent him. He was not the most decorated soldier of the war. He did not change strategy or redraw maps. He did something quieter and harder. He proved that individual courage still mattered, that imagination could defeat firepower, that refusing to accept the rules could be a weapon of its own. His legacy lives on in every special operations unit that values surprise over strength. In every soldier told something is impossible and chooses to try anyway. In the idea that fear can be turned against the enemy and that conviction can still bend history. Jack Churchill did not belong to the modern world, but the modern world is poorer without men like him. And as long as stories are told of swords against machine guns, of music under fire of courage, without permission, Mad Jack Churchill will never truly be gone. But here is the part almost no one talks about. After the war, after the medals, after the stories turned into legend, Jack Churchill did something strange, something quietly unsettling. He almost never spoke about one mission, not Norway, not Italy, not the camp. One operation never written about in detail, no full reports, no clear after-action records, just fragments, redacted pages, conflicting testimonies from men who were there and men who refused to talk. Years later, when asked why Churchill only smiled and said one sentence, "Some things only work once." What exactly happened on that mission? Why were the files sealed? And why did several German officers later claim they had faced something they couldn't explain? Something that broke discipline before a single shot was fired. We know what Jack Churchill became famous for. But what if his most effective weapon was something he never used again? That story is still buried. And it may change how you see everything you just watched.